Hello, Georgia admins, and welcome to the HUD Data Standards 2020 training video. So this video is just for CoC admins, and so I do have two separate videos that we've done for end users. One goes out to all general end users, and then one goes out to any path, street outreach, or CE end users. And you will need to watch both of those. So anything that's covered in those videos, I'm not going to be covering in this one. This one's just going to be for things that are only applicable to CoC admins. So that being said, we've got these changes that are coming out October 1st, 2019. Some of these changes are straight from HUD, which of course is the group that's kind of sets the standards for HMS of what we have to record in the system. And you probably all already know this because if you've been forced to ever be in any training we've done or in our weekly meeting, we talk about the data dictionary. You can easily get to these documents by Googling HUD data standards. It'll take you to the Exchange website. And so there's the data dictionary, latest and greatest, and also the data standards manual. So you definitely want access to both of those. Then there's also the little bit lesser known mapping file that they normally release when there is a standards update. And so it's an Excel file, and it's going to list the different mappings that will go on when there is something like new data standards that come out. So kind of how does the old way of doing things and where that's been recorded in the system map over to the new ways of doing things. So that can be a good document to have as well, and I'll probably refer to that at some point in this training video. So I've mentioned that HUD has new changes coming out. There's also going to be some just Ecovia client track specific changes that they decided to kind of implement during this process, and it's something they kind of do when there's new data standards coming out. They say, well, why not look and see if maybe there's some more changes we could do to kind of help the user experience and admin experience in the system. And then also there's just some specific changes we've done here in Georgia because we said, hey, if we're changing all this other stuff up, why not just pile on some more stuff, right? Hopefully our changes though make your life easier and not harder, but I will be covering those as well. So now let's go ahead and jump into the HUD changes. So the first form I'm going to go to is actually a form that CoC admins don't have access to, but I did want to show a certain element that has been added here that actually used to be on the project setup level, which is something you have access to. And this is the victim service provider question. So this used to be on every project you set up, you would have to answer this question. Now it's just going to be on the organization level. But what's going to happen in the update, the 10.1.19 update, and we can actually see that on our mapping document here, is any projects that have been set yes, that they are a victim service provider project, then the organization that is over that project, it will be set as yes for victim service provider. So that's kind of what will happen on 10.1.19 with the update. So I wanted to make sure that we're just kind of all aware of that in case there was any projects that are set up as a victim service provider and maybe really shouldn't be or anything like that, that we're all aware. So that being said, I do want to go ahead now and jump into the project setup here. And one question we're going to see is new is HMS participating project. So you're going to have to answer this yes or no for every project in the system, and this will be very relevant for the projects we're putting into the system to just record inventory. We know we have to have all of our inventory for projects in our CoC regardless if they use HMS or not, so this is where we'd be able to designate if this is one of those projects. And here's what I was talking about just a minute ago, that victim service provider is no longer captured on the project level. It's been moved to organization, but you will see a little placeholder here, and this would show the value. So if I had selected previously, before the update, either yes or no here, you would be able to see it, but you can't go in and change it or interact with it. It's just really there for more historic reasons. Next, I'm going to go over and look at our grants. So when we are adding grants, there's a couple of new options that you're going to see here. One, under VA Grant Per Diem, there is now this option here, Case Management / Housing Retention. So that is an option available under that federal grant program. We don't have a lot of grant per diem, VA grant per diem grants in Georgia, so I don't know if that's something that will really get a lot of use. Something that might be a little bit more relevant, though, is for the HUD CoC federal grant program. We now have the Joint Component TH / Rapid Rehousing Grant, so that is an option that you'll have access to as well. Of course, I'm doing all this in training, which I forgot to mention at the start of this, but this is all in our training database that you guys should all have access to. So you're welcome to actually go in, see all this for yourself, and then of course it won't go into production until the 10/1/19 date. Another grant source you're going to have here is local or other funding source. Now, this is something that is part of the new HUD data standards. It's basically a way where they have mandated that HMIS vendors have a way for communities and agencies and projects to set up projects and grants in the system that can be used in HMIS, but they don't actually get any federal funding. We already have this working, though, for Georgia at least, because we have, of course, our NA grant and our private grant, with NA grant being what we call the more full intake, and then the private grant setup gives you a more streamlined intake. And, of course, those have to both be used in the non-federally funded work group. So I don't know, that being said, I don't really know if we'll end up using this local or other funding source option or not. But I did just want to let you guys know it is here, and you will see it because HUD kind of says you have to. So it's there, but again, we already had kind of a solution in place to kind of handle those situations. Although in the future, who knows, it might play into us being able to consolidate those work groups where we don't have to have a non-fed work group. We could do that in the standard work groups, but anyways, for now, that's not something that's really set up to be used. So that covers the changes for the grants. So now I'm going to go back to project setup here, and I want to go in and look at inventory. So I'm going to pull up inventory for this project. There's going to be some changes on this form anytime we're adding inventory. One, we no longer have information date, so that is going away. And I say good riddance because I feel like that field caused a lot of confusion. And then it even caused some problems with like LSA, because if the information date was after the report end date, it wouldn't show up. And I think a lot of people were just confused about it across the board, not even just in Georgia. And so HUD has taken that away, so that will no longer be a thing. They've also moved some fields that were on the project level. They've now moved to the inventory level, and so one of those is your target population. So now you'll record target population on anytime you're doing inventory, no longer on the project. Then you also have housing type. Housing type is another thing that used to be on the project setup. Now it's just going to be on inventory. And we did reword it, you'll notice, a little different than it was. And this is to closer align with HUD's verbiage. Then we also have these beds designated for questions. So these are some new questions, or kind of a new layout task to the way they've got these worded now. So you'll see this for your inventory as well. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, so with information date going away, and also with updated instructions on how we're supposed to record inventory, it's actually gotten a lot more straightforward. So I don't think people will struggle as much with how do we go in and update inventory as it changes. And so I've actually set up an example here. So for instance, on this project here, on 8/1/16 is when beds first started being used, and we have 5 units, 10 beds. And that's how this project started out, right? Now on 8.1.17, they actually gained an extra unit and some more beds. So what you would do in that case is you would set an end date for 7/31/17. Then you're going to put a date this new group of inventory started, but it's going to include the previous inventory. So 8.1.17, now what is all of our inventory totaled at? So now we have 6 units instead of 5. We have 20 beds instead of 10, and we reflect it here. And then let's say on 8.1.18 we actually lost some of our units, and so we lost some beds as well. So we would do the exact same thing. We would just do an end date here of 7/31/18, and then we have a start date of 8/1/18, and then we reflect what our current inventory and bed inventory is. So I feel like this is just really straightforward. You can always come in, and this latest listing here is going to be what's relevant for today, but of course you have all the history here. So the idea here is these dates would not ever overlap, right? You're going to end inventory and then start inventory anytime there's a change. So again, hopefully that's pretty straightforward there. Now that actually covers all of the HUD specific changes as it would relate to an admin. So now we will jump into Ecovia changes. So some of these changes I am really excited about because I think it's going to make all of our lives really easier. I'm going to go back to the project setup form, and Ecovia has kind of redone the process of, or the forms that you would go in and create a new project with or go edit a pre-existing project. And they've done it where it's going to be a lot more streamlined of a process. So for instance, I'm going to go in and choose a pre-existing project, and I'm going to click edit. Now before, we know that basically the way you would set up a project is you would have to create a project, then you would have to go create a grant, then a third step, which a lot of times people would initially forget, is you had to go tie those two together. And it was only going through all 3 of those that you would actually get a project that you could enroll people into. So they've kind of combined that into one here. And so we've got our project information that we're used to seeing up top here. Here we've got our geography information, so they've also implemented that into this form, and also this will be set as required, so that way you can't create a project and forget to record inventory for it, or geography information, so that's awesome. But what's even greater is that they've integrated the funding sources in it with this area right here. So this is where it's going to show grants that are attached to it. And then of course down here you have your accessing organizations and the rest of the information for project setup. So I'm going to go in and just do add new, just so we can kind of see what this would look like when we haven't added anything. So there's all our information we're used to. There's our geography information. And then here under funding sources, so if we had already happened to create a grant, which you can still do, actually the grant form that your history form that you're used to seeing with the add new button, it is still there. So if you go to grants right here, you can go in and create a grant that way. But if the grant already did exist in the system, you could go in and select it here. Of course, with Georgia, we have a lot of grants and a lot of projects, and so it could be very confusing trying to do it this way. What I would recommend is if you're creating, a brand new project in the system, well, you're going to need a grant to go along with it. So you can do it all in one step here. If you actually just scroll to the bottom of this list, you'll see add new funding source. So this will be key, because if we click here, then it's going to bring our traditional grant setup form we're all used to. We would go ahead and key in our information here. And then after we did that and clicked save, it would then bring that grant up here already selected. And then we could just go ahead and continue with project setup. So again, this will make life a lot simpler on anyone that has to set up a project, because it's just going to be all in one step. Another kind of cool feature here is if we scroll to the very bottom of this, actually let me go in and let me look at a pre-existing project here so I can kind of show you this. So at the very bottom of this, there's an option called No Exit Interview Completed Action Override. So we know, or we probably most of us know, that when an end user, when they're exiting someone from the system, if they choose No Exit Interview Completed as the exit destination, what happens then is the workflow doesn't ask all those follow-up assessment questions like income, barriers, and whatnot, because it kind of figures, well, if there was no exit interview completed, then they would not have the information for those extra additional assessments, and so it just counts them as missing, and it goes ahead and exits the workflow. If you want to override that and you want the workflow to continue, so people can choose no exit interview completed when they're exiting someone, but still go in, for instance, and have an opportunity to record income if they happen to know what that was at an exit, then you can go in and set that override here by saying complete exit workflow. So again, if you choose complete exit workflow, the workflow is still going to go through on exit regardless of them using that no exit interview completed option. So I know that's something that some of you guys have kind of brought up and wanted a little bit more flexibility there, and now that has been added. So that covers the Ecovia changes, and now we can actually talk about just some changes that we've made here in Georgia for you guys. Oh, well, and actually before I start on those, there was one thing I forgot to mention, which I think will be, actually I know this will be very relevant for us. So you might have noticed there's some extra options here that you did not see before. So now there's an audit trail of changes that have been made to a project. So you'll be able to go in and see a history of if this project has been changed. So we can see listings here of if, like for instance, if this was set to transitional housing and now it's been set to emergency shelter, you'd be able to see that. And when that date happened, you would be able to also go in and see if the CoC has changed, of what CoC that project serves, what grants, the grants associated with it, program relationship, and so forth. So I think this could be really good and helpful just to kind of know what the history of a project has been, because it is a really big deal if, for instance, a project type changes, right? That's not something that normally we want to happen, but we realize sometimes a project was set up incorrectly to begin with, and we've never had a way to really know though, like if it's been changed or when it was changed. Well, now we'll be able to do that, so look forward to having this ability. So that being said, now I can get into just the changes that we've made for Georgia. So I think this is kind of exciting, but you know, the work group, Georgia HMS Programs with Issues, was a work group we created just for CoC admins to give them access to some features that you guys needed. Well, we're doing away with that work group. Rest in peace. The good news is, though, we've actually been able to integrate the different options that you had access to there. We've been able to integrate that with our standard work group that all the end users have access to already. And so what that means for you is you're not ever going to have to jump back and forth between the programs with issues or HMS programs. You can just stay in HMS programs. The way we were able to accomplish this is we set up a new user property, and I will show this to you real quick. And this new user property allows us to designate if someone is a CoC admin or not. And here we go right here under additional system access. And if they have this CoC admin box checked, then they'll have access to the additional fields and menu groups that CoC admins need. So this will be something that On 10.1.19, when the sync happens, then we will go in immediately, and for each of your user accounts, we'll go in and set this permission for you. So what this permission is going to do is, for instance, so we added issues workspace. This was not a workspace that you could get to normally as an end user, right? Like this workspace was not part of this work group at all. So what we did was we added it. We defaulted it to go to my submitted issues. So that would be the first form that is kind of brought up when an end user switches over to it, which is good, right? This is why they can see their submitted issues. We also added some more functionality on this, but it's covered in the other training video, so I won't really go into details on that. We also gave them access to a form we created called My Organization Submitted Issues, so they can see issues their organization has submitted. But they do not have access to this menu group here, so they would not see this. This will just be a blank area here. They won't even see the Manage Issues menu group listing here. But because you guys have the CoC Admin property, you will see this. And of course, this will allow you to get to your full issue search, so you can see all issue tickets in the system, assign any to you if there's new ones in and whatnot. And of course, maybe more importantly, it will let you get to the My Assigned issues, so you can see all the issue tickets that have been assigned to yourself. So again, this was a way we were able to kind of separate these two things out, still have the issues workspace available to end users, but also give you guys the added functionality that you needed, but I'll keep it in one work group. Another workspace we had to add was providers, because we know that it's very important for you as a CoC admin to be able to go in and set up referral services with different providers and whatnot. But we also knew that if we open this up, we did not want our end users to, have that kind of access. We didn't want them to be able to go in and add a new provider or change what services or referral services their organization is offering. So all they'll have access to is the Find Provider and Provider Dashboard buttons up here. And this Find Provider is locked down to just pull up the provider that's associated with their organization. So we can see here it's just pulling up this one provider because that's based on who I'm logged in as. And then they'd be able to click on Provider Dashboard and just see referrals that are coming into their organization. So that's all they have access to. This whole menu group right here, you're only going to be able to see this because you are designated as a CoC admin. So rest assured, we're not giving users access to anything they should not have. And then the same way on the home workspace here, this menu group here, CoC admin menu, of course, is only visible because you'd have access to or have that CoC admin permission set. So it's not anything that end users would have access to. So hopefully that makes your life easier. I know that's quite a few updates. Again, though, you'll want to watch the 2 user training videos that we're doing as well, because that's going to cover everything on the user side. And I hope you guys all have a great day. Thanks.